As we open up the Scriptures, I invite you to find a Bible and open it to Exodus in the 17th chapter. And there we will hear the account of the Israelites, the Hebrew people, with Moses out in the wilderness. And they're calling to God to provide for them what they need. Let us hear God's word. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. And the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted. They thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? To kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people, and take some of the elders of Israel with you, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Would have been quite a sight, wouldn't it? To be out there in the desert, in the wilderness, and nothing around, no water anywhere, nothing to sustain you at all. And Moses says, "I'm going to just take this stick, this staff, and I'm going to strike the rock just because God said so." And then he did, and water came out. What a sight. It's enough to take your breath away, I'm sure, if you saw it, huh? If you saw that happen, wouldn't you just be caught up and short of breath and disbelief and can't even imagine? And you're reminded again, God does provide. Isn't God awesome? Isn't God beautiful? Isn't God wonderful? What takes your breath away? What is it? Other than that flight of stairs, what takes your breath away? Other than the walk-in from the parking lot on a humid day from the car, and you find yourself huffing and a bit of short of breath? Other than those physical, what takes your breath away? Is it seeing that awesome sunrise or sunset on occasion that we have in this beautiful desert? Or, yeah, indeed. Or maybe it's standing there in the Grand Canyon and seeing the beautiful and just imagining how God made that happen. And the beauty that's there and the colors that shift with the changing lights, and it takes your breath away when you realize the enormity of it all, when you move away from the city lights and you look up into the heavens and you see the galaxies that are there, and the Milky Way is just there. We're a part of this vastness of God's creation, and it takes your breath away when you realize that God said, "Let there be," and there was. When God breathed life into you, and that first day, maybe you have had that experience where you held your firstborn or your child in your arms just after birth, and you looked into their eyes, into their life, and it took your breath away because you realized the miracle of it all. God breathes and there's life. And we experience that, and we find ourselves just in awe. That's what it is when your breath is just come up short there, when you realize God does provide, and God provides so much, so incredibly. So here were the people of Israel out in the wilderness. They had been brought out of Egypt, saved from oppression, slavery, saved from hard labor, and God provided for them. They saw and they witnessed God's mighty hand saving them. And the plagues that were cast upon the people so that they would set the Israelites free. And they witnessed then Moses taking that same staff and touching upon the waters of the sea, and they divided. They came apart so they could walk on through, and they were saved from the mighty oppressive armies of the Egyptians. They saw it all. And every time their breath would have been taken away by the glory of it, by the magnificence, by what God was providing and doing for them in their midst. And now they're in the middle of the wilderness, and they've been moving along. And God has been providing for them every step of the way, but it's all change. It's all now a new life. Shifting from a place that they knew in Egypt out into the wilderness, going to a place that they didn't know where it was going to be, in a promised land far and away. But even so, those changes, no matter if they're from something bad to something marvelous and good, can take the breath away, can cause one anxiety and concern whenever there's changing in life. I'm thinking of those who have graduated from high school and they're heading on to universities just shortly. For those who have finished at universities and are beginning jobs or graduate school or whatever it may be, something they've accomplished and now moving into something else. But it's change, it's challenge, and one can be caught short of breath. Yeah, because of all the marvelous things and the beauty that's before, but also because of the anxieties of change, of shifting in life, of wondering, will the next step, will I be able to do it? Will God really provide what's next there for me? Or maybe the next shift for you is one from into a place of where health isn't what it once was. And you're anxious about it. You're concerned about it. You're not sure what's there and what's next. And is God going to be there or not? I know God has been there before, but will God now? And so when life gets crazy and harried and frightening because of new chosen direction or because life is just thrust upon us, you stop and you breathe and you begin to count to 3. Isn't that what Mom said when you got a little bit just arms up in the air? Stop and count to 3. Count and breathe a bit. Just take a time out. We ought to take more time out these days for ourselves. When we get to be older and maturing too in life, take time out and step aside a bit. Just to breathe, to count to 3. So that was what was happening with the Israelites. The first time they stopped and they had to count, that first breath that they needed to take, when radical change occurs in life, you got to then tell the story and remember it. And so they would stop and they would rehearse again and again what God had been doing in their lives and where God had brought them. And so we have like a Psalm 105 that just stretches on and on and on. And the Psalms repeatedly do so. And in the Old Testaments, again and again, the story is rehearsed. And you might think, but I've heard it before. I've heard it time and again. But that's what you do. You stop, and you breathe, and you rehearse the story, and you remember, and you tell the story, and you claim it, and you say, that's my story too, and I'm a part of it. Even though it was the Israelites long ago, that story is yours today and now. It's just being lived out a little bit differently. But God is always setting us free from oppression, from some kind of bondage in our lives, from some kind of a way that we need to be set free into a new life, and God is providing for that. So we stop and we tell and we claim it. And we say, this is what's happening in my life. And we tell the story. We tell the truth about it. And we name the things that are obstacles in the way. We name the things that are the challenges and the fears that we have. We name the things that we're not sure we can get over and accomplish or go around in life. And we name them to ourselves, to our friends and family, to our God. We name them in that first breath when we stop along the way. How many times did they do that with Moses out in the wilderness? Whenever they stopped at another watering station, at another place where they needed to hopefully find something to sustain them, they would again rehearse and claim the story in that second breath that they would then take as well, that we need to take, is to tell the story about what's happening and what's taking place, but also about what has happened. We remember God's blessings. We remember then God has provided in the past. Now you need to trust God into today and into tomorrow. So we tell the story over and over again to rehearse it so the new generations will hear what God has done in our lives. Yes, way back when in the days of Moses, but all the more in your life now. You remember how God has been there with you and seen you through other times, and God is there with you now. You take that second breath, that breath of remembering what God has done, and how God has brought you to this place, and how God will provide. We have to do the remembering, because if we don't, we stop at a well like the Israelites did, and they had to name it the well of bitterness, because the water there was rank, it was bitter. But it was really a reflection of the bitterness that was coming from them, the complaining that seemed to bubble up about how bad things were and terrible they were. And Moses, you let us out here to die, forgetting that God had actually freed them from a place, forgetting that where they had come from has been God's providing and the company of the others who were with them. And so the bitterness can well up until we do the remembering, telling the stories of and resting in that, and then trusting God will indeed provide. And so God said, you take a branch from the neighboring tree and you dip it into that bitter well, and it will make it pure water. God helps to change bitterness that we feel in life because of the badness or the tough things that are going on, and purifies them. God does so through his grace. God does so through his holy presence and just saying, breathe easy. Breathe with me. And let the bitterness go away. And come into a new day of trusting with me and letting me guide you. And then God called them forward to the next well, and then the next well, and then the next one, all the way through the wilderness. And even water from a rock. How much more evidence does one need but that God provides? So when we forget, we can become resentful, we can become angry, until God helps us to breathe and to remember what he's been doing. But then we take the third breath. It's the third breath that in the midst of change, in the midst of new challenges, in the midst of trying to live in a new way that we're called to, it's living not in isolation but in community. That's that third breath. And that's how it was for the people of Israel. You're not alone in this journey. God reminded them around the well that they gathered, around the rock that they gathered where God was going to provide water, that they were not alone. They were with each other. They were not alone, they were with God. And so we breathe, remembering that I don't take this journey on my own in life. The challenge that's there before you, the difficulty that's there, I'm not alone in it. And we take the third breath, remembering that we're in the company of the Almighty. We're in the company of other believers and others who will be there to help me through, to provide, to be there with and for. And even the simple company of another can be all that's needed to move us forward